Disappearance represents humanity's most profound existential fear, the moment when someone simply ceases to exist, leaving behind only questions and an unbearable void. These three stories explore the thin membrane between known reality and the terrifying unknown, where rational explanation dissolves and supernatural possibilities emerge. Each narrative represents a different landscape of terror: an American forest where dimensions twist, a Siberian wilderness that consumes human presence, and a Scottish island where maritime legends blur the lines between natural and supernatural. They are stories of absence, of people erased from existence, of moments where scientific understanding collapses, and of spaces where something ancient and incomprehensible watches. Within these pages, a challenge awaits. As you journey through these tales of inexplicable vanishing, ask yourself, could these be true? Where does reality end and imagination begin? 3 vanishing horror stories. Story 1. The Bridgewater Triangle Incident. The GPS signal flickered, then died. Sarah Matthews gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white against the worn leather, a nervous habit that had followed her through years of ecological fieldwork. At 35, she'd traversed some of the most remote landscapes in North America, but something about this stretch of Massachusetts highway felt fundamentally wrong. She'd heard the stories about the Bridgewater Triangle since childhood, local legends whispered in small-town diners, passed down through generations of Massachusetts residents. UFO sightings, unexplained animal mutilations, people vanishing without a trace. As a scientist, she'd always dismissed such tales as folklore, the product of overactive imaginations and rural superstition. Now, driving through the dense forest between Raynham and Taunton, those dismissive thoughts felt like a fragile shield rapidly crumbling. Her research conference in Boston had been typical, a gathering of environmental scientists discussing climate change impact on regional ecosystems. Sarah's specialized work focused on tracking micro-environmental changes in Massachusetts' most remote regions. Her laptop bag, stuffed with meticulously collected data and field notes, sat securely on the passenger seat. The car's dashboard computer suddenly went dark. No warning, no gradual dimming, just instant, absolute blackness. Her smartphone, usually reliable even in the most remote areas, displayed nothing but static. Temperature inside the vehicle plummeted. Sarah's breath emerged in tight, anxious clouds despite the warm September evening. The air felt heavy, charged with an electricity that made the fine hairs on her arms stand at attention. Outside, the forest seemed alive, not in the way ecologists like herself appreciated, a complex ecosystem of interdependent organisms. No, this was different, sentient, watching. Shadows moved at the periphery of her headlights, not the typical dance of branches or nocturnal wildlife, but deliberate, calculated movements that suggested intelligence. Branches scraped against her car's windows with a rhythm that felt almost communicative. Local Native American legends spoke of this area as a supernatural convergence, a place where different dimensions potentially intersected. Sarah had always considered such narratives metaphorical, a cultural method of describing complex environmental interactions. Now those academic interpretations felt embarrassingly naive. A massive shape crossed the road ahead, too large for a deer, too fast for any known terrestrial creature. Sarah's foot hit the brake instinctively, the car skidding on the damp forest floor, tires losing traction. Silence descended, absolute and complete, no engine sound, no crickets, no wind, just silence. When search parties eventually discovered her vehicle 3 weeks later, it was pristine, no signs of damage or struggle. Her laptop remained open, research data intact, a half-finished cup of coffee gone cold and moldy. The driver's door hung open, inviting investigation, revealing nothing. Sarah Matthews had become just another statistic in the Bridgewater Triangle's long, mysterious history. 3 vanishing horror stories. Story 2. The Siberian Expedition. Dr. Michael Kozlov understood isolation. It was a concept carved into the very DNA of Russian scientific expeditions, a brutal, unforgiving intimacy with the most inhospitable landscapes on Earth. The Yamal Peninsula represented the pinnacle of such isolation, a vast white wilderness that stretched beyond human comprehension, where temperatures could plummet to -50 degrees. Silence became a tangible, suffocating presence. Their geological expedition was meticulously planned. 5 experienced researchers, each with decades of Arctic exploration between them, advanced satellite communications, cutting-edge equipment, emergency protocols that had been refined through generations of Soviet and post-Soviet scientific missions. They were mapping potential drilling sites, collecting core samples from the ancient permafrost that held secrets older than human civilization. Pavel Volkov was their youngest team member, a brilliant geophysicist with a doctoral degree from Moscow State University, 32 years old, with a beard that made him look older. His eyes held the kind of intense curiosity that drove scientific discovery. He was setting up ground-penetrating radar near a particularly unusual geological formation when the first anomalies began. "Mikhail," he called over the radio, his voice crackling with static, "these readings don't make sense." Kozlov remembered those words with a clarity that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Nenets people, indigenous to this region, had warned them. Not directly. Scientific teams didn't typically engage with local folklore, but through subtle hints dropped by the support staff in Salakard. Stories of ancient spirits, guardians of the land that protected their territory from outsiders with a ruthlessness that defied rational explanation. Pavel's disappearance was instantaneous. One moment he was there, meticulously adjusting equipment. The next, nothing. No footprints, no disturbance in the snow, just an impossible, complete absence. The team's initial professional protocol gave way to a methodical search. GPS tracking showed Pavel's location marker, then a sudden, impossible movement, hundreds of meters in a split second. Then total signal loss. Viktor Petrov disappeared next. A veteran of multiple Arctic expeditions, he was tracking geological stratification when his satellite communications simply stopped. His last transmitted coordinates showed him in the middle of a flat snow plain, then a rapid, physically impossible relocation, then silence. Local folklore spoke of the Nguoteto, spirit guardians that protected sacred lands, entities that could manipulate space and perception, rendering humans invisible, transporting them between dimensions with a thought. Kozlov had always been a man of science, rational, methodical, the kind of researcher who approached every phenomenon with skepticism and empirical methodology. But as the Arctic storm approached, consuming the horizon in a wall of white fury, rationality began to crumble. The wind carried something, not a sound, not a voice, something else, a presence, something ancient, something watching, something that did not welcome human intrusion. 3 Vanishing Horror Stories. Story 3. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse Mystery. The North Atlantic had always been unforgiving. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse stood as a sentinel against this maritime wilderness, constructed on the most isolated of the Outer Hebrides. It was built to guide ships through treacherous waters. James Ducat, 43, was the principal lighthouse keeper, a veteran of maritime service who understood survival meant absolute attention to detail. Thomas Marshall, 39, was quieter, more introspective. Donald MacArthur, the youngest at 40, completed the trio of experienced professionals tasked with maintaining this critical beacon. Their rotation was standard: 2 weeks on the lighthouse, 2 weeks on the mainland, a rhythm dictated by maritime necessity. December 26, 1900 was supposed to be routine, but nothing about that day would prove ordinary. Weather reports had warned of an approaching storm system unlike anything seen in decades. Massive Atlantic swells, wind speeds that could strip paint from metal. These conditions would test even the most robust maritime infrastructure. The relief vessel Hesperus was delayed by these storm conditions. When Captain Robert Rennie finally approached the Flannan Isles, an unnatural silence greeted them. No signal flags, no response to communications. The lighthouse stood silent, its critical beacon unlit, a violation of every maritime protocol. As they drew closer, the impossibility became apparent. The lighthouse appeared intact, no damage, no structural compromise, just absence. The landing party discovered a scene that would become one of the most enduring maritime mysteries in Scottish history. Inside, everything was meticulously organized. Chairs pushed perfectly under the table, a half-eaten meal left mid-bite, logbooks filled out normally, but of the 3 keepers, no trace. Their outdoor gear was missing, no boats were gone, no signs of struggle, no indication of what might have happened to these experienced professionals. One of the men's last log entries, written in an unusually shaky hand, mentioned something disturbing. Something is watching, not from the sea, not from the land, from somewhere else. The official investigation concluded nothing. The men had simply disappeared, leaving behind a perfectly maintained lighthouse and more questions than answers. In the decades that followed, the Flannan Isles mystery would become folklore, academic papers, maritime documentaries, musical compositions, each attempting to solve an unsolvable puzzle. But the sea keeps its secrets and the lighthouse stands, silent, waiting. Of these 3 haunting narratives, one stands as absolute truth, a real historical event that defies explanation. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse Mystery is not fiction. On December 26, 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, genuinely vanished from the Flannan Isles Lighthouse off the Scottish coast. Official investigations found no conclusive explanation. Their disappearance remains one of maritime history's most perplexing mysteries. The actual records show the lighthouse was found abandoned. No bodies were ever recovered. All equipment was in perfect order. No signs of struggle were evident. Weather logs confirmed extreme conditions. While the specific narrative details have been dramatized, the core event is factual. Numerous historical documents, maritime records, and investigative reports confirm the fundamental truth of the lighthouse keeper's unexplained disappearance. The Bridgewater Triangle and Siberian expedition stories, while inspired by real locations and historical phenomena, are fictional constructions designed to explore the psychological terrain of mysterious vanishings. Some mysteries, it seems, refuse resolution,